Credibility of America's top general now in doubt. Mark Milley under pressure. Pressure to address accusations of treason as the White House and the Pentagon both defend his actions. As we say good morning, trying to sort through this today. I'm Bill Hemmer. It is Thursday. Nice to see you, Dana.
Nice to see you. You love Thursdays.
Yes.
Dana Perino, this is America's Newsroom. He's always loved Thursdays, and I like them too. Republicans are pressing for answers in response to a report that General Milley placed secret calls to China in an effort to undermine President Trump.
So a senior defense official disputing that. The source telling Fox News the calls were done at the request of then Defense Secretary Mark Esper, and that these conversations were far from secret with more than a dozen other people on the line.
Lawmakers will get a chance to grill Milley on all of this when he appears before the Senate Armed Services Committee on September 28th. Meantime, President Biden is standing behind his chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Sir, did General Milley do the right thing, sir?
Thank you.
In your opinion, did General Milley do the right thing?
I have great confidence in General Milley.
He is a man of honor. He is a man who's the president's confident in his leadership, his patriotism, his fidelity to the Constitution.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is here with a reaction. Trey Yingst is on the ground in Afghanistan. But first, let's go to the Pentagon. Lucas Tomlinson is standing by. Good morning, Lucas.
Good morning, Dana. Some of the same people that didn't believe anything Bob Woodward was writing about President Trump now believe everything he's saying about General Milley. The Pentagon says these calls to China were not secret. They were routine.
I can tell you, frequent communication with two countries like Russia and China is not atypical at all for a chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And those communications are they're routine, they're staffed, they're coordinated, and they're transparent.
The U.S. military's top general often calls his Russian counterpart as well, normally before major training exercises on both sides. General Milley called his Russia's top general back in March when Russian forces massed outside Ukraine and there was concern an invasion was about to take place. General Milley's top spokesman defended the two calls to China. Quote, his calls with the Chinese and others in October and January were in keeping with these duties and responsibilities, conveying reassurance in order to maintain strategic stability. It wasn't just General Milley making phone calls. Then President Trump's defense chief ordered his policy team to do the same. Officials say Defense Secretary Mark Esper even ordered a delay in a major training exercise in the Pacific. The Pentagon yesterday also defended General Milley's role in nuclear weapons launch procedures.
It is completely appropriate for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as the senior military advisor to both the secretary and the president, to want to see those protocols reviewed on whatever frequent basis that he wants to do that.
Senator Tom Cotton doubts that General Milley would ever warn the Chinese about any potential attack. Dana?
Thank you so much, Lucas.
So with us now, former U.S. Ambassador at the UN, Nikki Haley. And Madam Ambassador, good morning to you. Not sure where you stand on this. Go ahead and weigh in. Where are we? Where are we going?
Good morning. Well, the only thing I can do is refer it back to experiences I had. It is not uncommon that the Chinese will call or the Russians will call. You keep your enemies close. And they would call and say, look, should we be concerned? Is there something going on? The questions, there are more questions than there are answers. And the questions are, okay, exactly what did he say? Did he say, I would give you a heads up if something was happening? What I typically did was I would say, well, this is what the U.S. expects of you. And if you don't want any trouble, this is what you should do. I would immediately give that right out to the interagency so that every agency head saw the call that I had. And then I'd pick up the phone and call the president and say, I just talked to the Chinese. This is what they're thinking. This is what I said. Is there anything further you want me to do? It's that last part that's so important. And the reason why I say that's important is I talked about in my book, there were multiple members of the administration that thought they knew better than the president. That's a very dangerous thing. There is only one president at a time. And for you to go and have the call with the Chinese, there's nothing wrong with that. For you not to tell the president that you had that call with the Chinese and for him not to be aware, that's the problem, is because you want him to be all informed and at his best to proceed. You don't have the back of the Chinese, you have the back of your president. And that's the part that has all the questions.
Madam Ambassador, Jonathan Swan of Axios reports that, again, this is all based on anonymous sources. The Woodward book, these reports, so I take all of it with a grain of salt. I know you do too. But he reports that Milley was acting on the instructions of then Defense Secretary Mark Esper. If that were the case, is what Milley did appropriate?
Well, first of all, I think that you're right. These tell-all books, it's like there's one a week. And I think that as much as we're asking for answers from Milley, you have to ask the same answers from Woodward. They don't get to just say this and it be true. We have to ask Woodward where he got this from, or else we don't need to be justifying this. If Esper asked him to do this, it still goes back to the fact that Milley and Esper both should have had a conversation with the president and said, we have intel that the Chinese are worried we're going to start some sort of war action. We're going to give them a call. This is what we're thinking. Are you okay with that? The whole part is to not have communication with the president, to not discuss with him what you are doing is a real issue, especially if the Chinese think that you're about to go to war with them. That's no small issue. That's the issue that you bring in the commander-in-chief. So there are more questions than there are answers. I think we need to get answers to that. Look, everybody's suspicious of Milley when we already look at what happened in Afghanistan, but that's questions on Biden. You know, did Milley tell you don't do this in Afghanistan and you overruled him? And, you know, I think the fact that Biden is going on this COVID mandate, spree around the country is only him further distracting from what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on in the border. Those are two very dangerous situations that need to be dealt with, and I think Biden's getting a total free pass on both of them.
Well, that last point is very well taken, because the hearing on September 28th, a Tuesday, was all designed to set up for what about the drawdown in Afghanistan and how did that happen? And a lot of that is being lost now, Madam Ambassador. And I would imagine, unless we get answers or a transcript from the conversation itself, half that hearing could be consumed by this as opposed to the chaos in Kabul.
Well, you know, the first thing I'll say is the reason Biden has full faith in Milley is because Milley didn't do this to Biden. If Milley had done this to Biden, he would be all upset and have the same issues and the same concerns. And look, if you'll do it to one president, you'll do it to another. This is where protocols need to be clarified. This is where, you know, a president needs to go in there and say, I don't care what it is. If you hear from one of our adversaries, if you make a call to one of our adversaries, I want to know about it. I want to know what's going to happen. That's the part that is missing. I'll tell you on the transcripts, I'm very cautious about releasing transcripts just because, look, none of our allies, none of our adversaries will talk to us if they know it's going to all go out to the American public. There is, you know, a lot of that is national security, and you have to be able to hold that. So I'm not quick to say release the transcript. I am quick to say pull Milley in, pull Esper in, let's get answers on Afghanistan. Let's get answers on protocols and how you're handling our adversaries going forward. Biden deserves to know it. Trump deserves to know it. And the American public deserves to know the protocols that are in place when an adversary calls.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Nikki Haley, thank you. Come back soon. Kabul, the chaos there, the border. We'll get to that in a moment here. In the meantime, you brought up a great point before we went on the air. You know, Democrats are moving forward, the $3.5 trillion deal, that bill, that if passed, will affect
fundamentally change
everyone.
America. Yeah.
Correct on
that. I think that in some ways this story does benefit Biden because we're not focused on how they're going to raise taxes on Americans. But the other thing is just a point on this. So the National Review headline today is the General Milley story really a Mark Esper story? And asking basically if Milley was following Esper's lead, that's something not even hinted by Woodward and Costa. It doesn't make it a non-story, but it does give us a little bit more to chew on. And I have to ask this. Are the authors comfortable with this? Because they want to sell books, I get that. But General Milley is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So if this was a story, you would imagine the Washington Post would have wanted that out there beforehand as a news gathering organization. This happens a lot with books. But I would really wonder if the nuance and the context about all of this is not being reported based on the leak of the book, are the authors comfortable with that?
Book's out in 5 days, I think. I would imagine you'll see interviews with Woodward and Costa this weekend.
We'll see.
And the invite is welcome to both men to join the program.
Also, Fox News is following the unfolding chaos in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan from all angles. That includes a rare one-on-one interview with a leader of one of the groups.
Dana, good morning. The Taliban says the United States is not living up to the Doha Agreement. Today we spoke with Anas Haqqani of the infamous Haqqani Network. He's personally responsible for ordering hundreds of suicide bombings. He was previously imprisoned at the U.S. Bagram Air Base and today is speaking out about the U.S. troop withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Getting Americans out of Afghanistan was always the aim of the Afghans. That's why they put suicide vests on their bodies. Getting them out now is a big victory achievement for Afghans. You'd also be proud if your heroes kicked out invaders from your land.
I also news about the Biden administration. In an off-camera meeting, he told me the Taliban wants all countries to have consulates and representation in Kabul, though he claims the United States is not living up to their end of the bargain.
Beginning of the agreement in Doha, the United States misused the agreement and broke the rules. The Islamic Emirate, we stand by our agreement. Blacklist of Taliban is also included. Unfortunately, the United States is not doing what they're saying. What they are saying is against the Doha agreement, and they are calling for a new war and causing more chaos.
In addition to speaking with Anas Haqqani, we also talked today with a special immigrant visa applicant who called on the U.S. government to live up to their promises. We'll have more on that later today. Dana?
All right, I'm looking forward to hearing all of that, Trey. Thank you. Stay safe.
Fascinating look we got yesterday from Trey about arriving at the airport in Kabul. And the guards are Taliban. The people who are his escorts throughout Afghanistan, they're members of the Taliban too. And the conversations he has with them. And they describe how they're in battle 8, 9, 10 years ago with American forces. And how that interaction goes back and forth. And it's an eye-opener, too. Hopefully we'll get a reporter's notebook with Trey about what's happening there in Kabul. And I think it really peels back the layer as to what they're experiencing now. Western reporters escorted from the airport back into the Afghan capital. That's what they're doing now.
I'm glad that he's there. I'm learning a lot from him. Watch this now.
What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm sorry. We've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
So what you're watching there is new footage that shows Utah police responding to a domestic incident. That's Gabby Petito, now missing, and her boyfriend back in Florida, only weeks before she disappeared. So we'll play more for that coming up in a moment.
You know, we can't, I got nothing that, you know, that's my only daughter, you know, and I can't, right now I can't give her a hug. I know she needs it, and she needs help, and she's nowhere to be found.
Joe was with us yesterday, is on Fox a bit earlier today. Man hasn't slept. Heartbroken father, the missing Long Island woman, Gabby Petito, making a desperate plea this morning. The father is. Now we're getting this brand new video, okay? This was a police stop in Moab, Utah, back on the 12th of August. Roll this.
I had the female that was in the passenger seat separated from the male. Keys are on the hood. You want to tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just some days I have really bad OCD, and I was just cleaning and straightening up the back of the van before, and I was like,
so just go ahead and take a seat.
So clearly from that video, you can see a visibly upset Gabby after a fight with her boyfriend, Brian Laundrie. Police have named him a person of interest in the case. That happened late yesterday. Carly Shimkus at her post, Northport, Florida. With more there, Carly. And according to the police report, neither one of those individuals wanted to file a police report against the other. What else do you have there now in Florida?
Yeah.
Good morning.
Well, we have been outside Brian Laundrie's parents' house all morning long. We haven't seen any activity, no lights that have turned on that we can see, no doors opening. Everybody is remaining inside. It is believed that this is where Brian came back to after he left that road trip without Gabby Petito, the one that he started on July 2nd. They were touring national parks and documenting their trip for a YouTube series. They were on the surface of it all a very happy couple, but Now police have named Brian Laundrie a person of interest in the case of her disappearance. Police say that he has remained completely tight-lipped. He has not provided any interviews or any useful information at all, despite the fact that he could have been the last person to see Gabby Petito. Now, as for that body camera footage that you just showed, that was taken by a responding officer of the Moab, Utah Police Department. They were responding to a disturbance of some sort that took place on August 12th. A witness told police that he saw Brian and Gabby arguing over the phone and then saw Gabby hit Brian in the arm, climb through the driver's side window of their van as if Brian had locked her out. In the body camera footage, she is extremely upset. The police officer said that she was sobbing uncontrollably. Another interesting note on the police report that's getting a lot of attention this morning, Brian told police that they both suffer from a condition. The name of the condition was redacted from the report, but he also said that they were not taking medication for whatever that condition was. The police report also says Brian explained he and Gabrielle have been traveling together for the last 4 or 5 months. That time spent created emotional strain between them and increased the number of arguments. I just spoke to a man who lives down the street from the Laundrie household. He says he saw that white van that everyone is talking about parked outside the Laundrie house. That's the van that actually belonged to Gabby Petito, that Brian drove back home without her. He says he saw it outside the house. His wife saw police take it away. Police in this town say that they have finished their search of the van. They're interested in a few things that they found inside of it, but we don't know what those items are at this point. The mother has also been very vocal, Gabby Petito's mom. She says that despite the fact that she saw the last confirmed interaction with her daughter was August 25th, she did receive a text message from Gabby's phone on August 30th, but she says she's not sure it came from Gabby. She's wondering if it could have possibly come from Brian. Police say that there is technology that could track where that text message came from. Bill?
Thank you, Carly. Carly Shimkus down there in Florida.
Let's bring in attorney Philip Holloway. He's a former assistant DA and a former police officer. And as you look at this case, what are the things that come to mind?
Tragic, sad. I have to talk about it. I can't imagine families.
You might not have Philip's audio.
Sure. Bear with us one moment here, Philip. We'll try and bring that into you so our viewers can hear you. I mean, he's got a lot to say, especially about the cross-country trip that the boy took to get back to Florida.
Right.
You know, from Wyoming to Florida, a lot of places in between there.
You've got to stop and get gas.
Yeah.
You've got to go into a convenience store or a rest area. So presumably there would be surveillance footage at some point along the way.
So our apologies for that. I don't think we're going to be able to make the connection. Phil, we tried. We'll try it. We'll bring it back because you're really good at all this stuff. One of the other things he says, Dana, is be patient and let law enforcement do their work.
Right.
And police have a social media trail of breadcrumbs, his words now, to start from. Now, what is that? You know, they've been posting on YouTube and Instagram for their entire trip. And we also know they're on their phones all day long. So police are going to be able to have this. They'll be able to trace where she was and where he was, and in all likelihood, they've already got that information.
That's a really good point. And Philip said that also, just to reiterate this point about he drives back to Florida. So at some point, he had to make some stops, and that is also where you might be able to see if she was there.
Yeah.
Right?
Two other points here is that he was communicating with someone along the way, not just her. So, I mean, there's evidence out there. And also, yesterday when the father was on the air with us, he said, will you please tell me who took down our Instagram account? And we're What's that all about? Then later in the day, the Instagram account went back up. Well, who's messing with that? Is it Brian, someone else, or is it her?
Right.
So all these clues are out there, and we'll see what police have to say later today. There is likely a press conference at noon, and the FBI might be there. So if that happens, we'll bring it to you.
There might be news.
Okay, in the meantime, awaiting a major update on the investigation into the origins of the Russia probe. We are told prosecutor John Durham could be mere hours away from taking his case to a grand jury. Details on that in a moment. Plus, 4 of America's top gymnasts. They gave gut-wrenching testimony on the abuse from team doctor Larry Nassar. They say their stories fell on deaf ears at the FBI. So will anyone be held accountable?
Over the past few years, it has become painfully clear how a survivor's healing is affected by the handling of their abuse.
Making July's record high. New data showing border agents encountered more than 208,000 migrants in August. It's the second month in a row where border crossings have topped 200,000, marking a 233% jump from August of 2019. Bill Melugин's been all over the story, live today on the border in Texas. Bill, good morning to you. I do believe going back to January 20th, we're at now 1.2 million encounters since Joe Biden has been in the White House. Good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. That's right. Those numbers continue to be remarkable. And just to put it in perspective for you, 208,000 in August. That's roughly the size of Birmingham, Alabama, coming across our border in one single month. And we want to show you the kind of impact that's having. Take a live look at our drone up in Del Rio, Texas right now, where, okay, we apparently don't have the drone up right now. If we can pull up a second piece of video right now from the ground, what you're looking at here are thousands of migrants who are waiting to be processed underneath the International Bridge in Del Rio, Texas. This was just sent to me by a source on the ground there. I'm told right now there are currently more than 8,000 migrants waiting to be processed underneath that bridge after they just crossed into the United States illegally. What I'm being told is happening there is Border Patrol facilities, their holding facilities in the area, are so overwhelmed, so over capacity, they just don't have any to take these people right now. So they're coming across and they are just congregating underneath that bridge. This time yesterday, there were 4,000 people under that bridge. It has now swelled to over 8,200. That is a doubling in a span of just 24 hours. What I'm being told by my sources on the ground is these are mostly immigrants from Haiti, which might make sense because they recently had a presidential assassination in the last few months. They just had a recent earthquake, and I'm being told these people are streaming in by the minute. It's getting bigger every single hour. And these border agents on the ground there, their manpower is overstretched, overwhelmed, and they do not have the resources to cope with it right now. Send it back to you.
Ongoing as it goes. Thank you, Bill Melugin, back on the border today in Texas. Thank you, Bill.
I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse. If you allow a predator to harm children, the consequences will be swift and severe.
This was very clear, cookie-cutter pedophilia and abuse. And this is important because I told the FBI all of this, and they chose to falsify my report and to not only minimize my abuse, but silence me yet again.
The survivors of Larry Nassar have a right to know why their well-being was placed in the jeopardy by these individuals who chose not to do their jobs.
Some of the harrowing testimony from victims of Larry Nassar at yesterday's Senate hearing. FBI Director Christopher Wray admits that the Bureau failed to properly investigate sexual abuse complaints by Team USA gymnasts. Now critics are demanding that both the FBI and the Justice Department be held accountable. Jim Trusty is a former federal prosecutor. There's so much to unpack here, Jim. You had a lot of interaction with the FBI. I know that you're disgusted by this as well. I think that those young women were unsatisfied yesterday. What do you think?
They should be. I mean, this is not just a function of negligence. This was actually corruption by the special agent in charge in Indianapolis. He got these reports mishandled it from the get-go in very strange ways. First of all, handling it himself, which is not what you normally do in the FBI. You assign it to one of the line agents. Not documenting things, doing a telephonic interview of Michaela Maroney. That's not how you treat sex offense victims. And all of that led to a moment where he talked to the U.S. Attorney's Office and said, what do I do with this? And they said, ship it to Michigan. And that's the crux of the problem here. At that point, this special agent in charge, for, I think, corrupt reasons, refused to send the case to Michigan, lied about it to the Inspector General, and an 8-month delay in the investigation followed.
What could the corrupt reasons be?
Well, on the back end of the Inspector General's report, in a very antiseptic way, as they usually write it, they talk about how this guy went to a bar with the official from the U.S. Gymnastics Organization. And they sat in a bar and he said, you know, this is really a horrible story, this Dr. Nassar thing. It's really bad for the FBI. It's bad for U.S. Gymnastics. And essentially commiserated on the fact that it's going to be public and wanted to get in front of it. But the purpose for the bar meeting, apparently, was he wanted to lobby for a job as like a head of security position with the U.S. Olympic Committee. So he wanted to retire from the FBI and cash out by burying the story of this molestation and using that as leverage to get a job with the U.S. Olympic Committee. It's flat out disgusting.
Absolutely. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say disgusting as well. Here's Michaela Maroney about that burying of the report.
They chose to fabricate. They chose to lie about what I said and protect a serial child molester. What is the point of reporting abuse if our own FBI agents are going to take it upon themselves to bury that report in a drawer?
And now, Jim, I want you to listen to Christopher Wray. He's now the director of the FBI. This is what he said yesterday.
I'd like to make a promise to the women who appeared here today. Survivors of abuse. I am not interested in simply addressing this wrong and moving on. It's my commitment to you that I and my entire senior leadership team are going to make damn sure everybody at the FBI remembers what happened here in heartbreaking detail.
Jim, he was not the head of the FBI at the time. Who was, and why isn't that person being hauled up in front of Congress?
Right. Look, there's huge questions of whether Jim Comey or whether officials at DOJ should be part of this story. And remember, it's not just the abuse of our gymnast heroes and the American team. Nassar was also the team physician for a high school team and for a travel team. And during that 8-month gap, Dana, 70 new victims. 70 victims that didn't have to be molested if this FBI special agent in charge and whoever enabled him hadn't made the decision to table this case for 8 months.
Jim, why isn't he being prosecuted?
Great question. I think that's something that Congress or whoever should be looking into, including the Attorney General and Chris Wray. The problem that I can see from the Inspector General report is they had some compelled interviews. And compelled interviews means no Fifth Amendment, which means prosecution has been sworn off. Wow. So I think that probably means that they made a decision, somebody made a decision that Mr. Abbott was not going to face any criminal consequences. He could retire, get his pension, and move on like nothing happened.
Disgusting and not good enough. Indeed. Jim Trusty, thank you.
It was amazing, brave testimony that we watched yesterday there. Jim, thank you. 22 minutes before the hour now. Is all attention good attention? Not King July's record high. New data showing border agents encounter more than 208,000 migrants in August. It's the second month in a row where border crossings have topped 200,000, marking a 233% jump from August of 2019. Bill Malugian's been all over the story, live today on the border in Texas. Bill, good morning to you. I do believe going back to January 20th, we're at now 1.2 million encounters since Joe Biden has been in the White House. Good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. That's right. Those numbers continue to be remarkable. And just to put it in perspective for you, 208,000 in August. That's roughly the size of Birmingham, Alabama, coming across our border in one single month. And we want to show you the kind of impact that's having. Take a live look at our drone up in Del Rio, Texas right now, where okay, we apparently don't have the drone up right now. If we can pull up a second piece of video right now.